And this is where I want to start off with some tips. I mean, uh, a lot of shops use them. A lot of dealerships use these tips. But this was actually, like I said, was put together by a group, not just me sitting there talking to you about it. We will get back into the OBD2 as we go, if we have time today. But I wanted to get that kicked off. So I'm going to start sharing a program, this program I was talking to you about earlier, that was actually put together, and it was actually put together mainly for smog technicians, but it does play a good role in all shops and stuff like this. So basically, we're talking about, because this is what we are in class talking about engine performance. We're talking about strategies that will gain as much information with the least amount of actual testing. And but part of that is, how do we start the process? So believe it or not, the little diagram we have over here on the very right hand side was actually developed by General Motors first off. This was their first diagnostic routine. And one of the things that how they started off with this, they actually got together with, the engineers got together with, believe it or not, technicians. And they followed the technicians, or the master technicians' footsteps, and watched the way this person actually diagnosed things. And then they went through a bunch of different technicians to go through this process. So this is what General Motors actually first put together. And this, if you notice right on the very top, it says verify customer's concern. And I can't stress that enough, folks. If you just jump in there, start throwing scan tools on it, and the communication between you and your customer was not very clear, you may be jumping in there, assuming things, and possibly replacing wrong parts, or not, getting down to the root cause of the problem. So, but the first steps in diagnosis failure or drivability concerns is interviewing the driver of the vehicle. And this is the driver. You will have occasions from time to time where, let's say, a person drops it off for the person that actually drives the car most often. Maybe the father drops it off for the sons or the daughters, drops off the sons or daughters' car, or vice versa, or a friend drops off the car and hands you the keys. They have very little knowledge of what's going on. This may be a time that you really need to talk or make that phone call and say, hey, we've got your car in here. They say, the person that dropped off the car says that you are the one that normally drives the car. I wondered if I could get some little bit more information about when this particular concern happens. And that drops down to the next part. Okay, when did the problem first occur? Did it come on suddenly, or has it been creeping up over time? So over a month, over a week ago? Did it happen yesterday? Did it actually happen today? How often does the problem occur? Does it do every time you drive it, or intermittently? And sometimes those intermittents really can have your kind of challenge your actual diagnostic procedures and diagnostic abilities and like that too. Uh, Engine temperature, and this gets really critical when it comes down to computer controlled cars too. Is does it do it only when it's cold? On the warm up cycle. In other words, it doesn't do it when it's cold, but when it's going to that phase when it's starting to warm up, it tends to do a little more. And then what is or is it at operating temperature? Is it the gauge at halfway, and it starts, acting up? So the temperature can be a big thing. When we look at temperatures, and we are getting into a hot time in California, and my understanding from listening to the news and reading a bit, they're saying that this is probably going to be one of the hottest summers we've had. And today being one of those days, it's going to really challenge um, air conditioners and our resolve in keeping cool. So this is really important. When I think of a temperature type thing, one of the first things that pops into my head is air charge sensors. If there's a fault in something like that, I'm also thinking of cooling systems. Are they adequate to keep the heat off the vehicle? So these things just kind of rush through my head when customers start saying, yeah, it only does it, when it's first warming up. Oh, there goes coolant sensor in my head. Or actually the imbalance between the coolant sensor and the actual air charge sensor. So now these things kind of pop in and you can start gathering or getting an idea of what the problem might be. And that led into the outside temperature. And as we all know, that when the temperatures rise, the oxygen molecules that we use in the combustion process kind of scatter, and they don't keep as tightly and they don't keep as tightly together. So the combustion process can actually be um, um, kind of compromised, which again, it kind of leads back to that air charge sensor again. And hot, cold, hot, or all the times kind of scenario type that. Okay, driving conditions, is it only do it when it's at idle? And that kind of led into kind of my little scenario. And notice I said at idle, it's shake. Okay, so that kind of says, okay, and now and I like the idea of the motor mounts, because this is one thing that you do definitely have to educate some of your customers on. When they feel a shake, it's just a shake. It doesn't, they don't, and I would say not all, but some do not understand that there's a lot of things that cause that shakiness. It could be just a rough idle, but I did add in the hesitation, so that should give you another clue as we go around. So is it idle around town or on the freeway that does it? You may have some hesitations only on the freeway, which kind of sets off some things in my head, like fuel pressure. Maybe I have a car with an EGR that is more overactive up on the freeway too. Uh, Around town, again, hesitation could be that, like one of the groups said, a throttle position sensor. If I have a hesitation off idle, okay, I could have a bad part of the actual carbon resistor pad that actually has a drop off. And I would find that potentially by doing a sweep test on my TPS or my throttle position sensor, and with a lab scope or a DSO to see that drop off happen. And then, gear selection. Did I have it in drive? Did I have it in park? Was it only in reverse? This kind of weird stuff happens. When it's in reverse, we put it into almost a direct drive, and it can actually cause more load, which possibly could actually do that. And this can come down to what kind of transmission you have too. Okay, some of the Hondas actually had a switch to let it know it was in gear or not, and that would, part of that had to do with the clutch switch. And then if you hit that and it didn't activate correctly, it would not take it out of base, kind of uh, programming, and it wouldn't go into the more of a performance. So you would actually have some hesitations. You would have some kind of non-performance issues and like that too. And then road conditions, was it on level ground? It did it. It only does it uphill. There again, the groups all come down to a spark plug, coil pack, spark plug wires, and this is a true test of when you're going uphill. Um, One of the things I liked working in Torrance was I had the peninsula right over, and it had a nice hill. And if I had a customer complain about a hesitation and I wanted to verify it, I'd drive it up that hill like that. other, downhill, you may have possibly some transmission issues. And there again, as performance, or diagnostic technicians in the performance.
Marty,
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Just that you said going uphill. So what would you lean on if it was going uphill with some hesitation? I mean, would you go to different things, or would it concern the same things you're already looking at?
Yeah, basically, when I start going uphill, I'm putting more of a load on it. And when you put more of a load on something, and sometimes you can just do it from a in drive with the brake applied, you can get it to hesitate. And I'm looking when I'm driving uphill, I'm looking for possible ignition breakdown. And that's one of the first things. And that's why I like that load. If you have a dyno, man, you've got a tool that actually will do a lot more for you on that too. You can, if you have a performance dyno, I'm not talking about your regular smog dynos, but if you have a performance dyno, you can do a lot more. But that is a lot, and that is a true expense. I don't think any of us can actually spend about 20 to 30 grand on a performance dyno. That's a little bit expensive just for that part. I think Cerritos College spent about 60 grand on just their actual dyno, performance dyno. So I hope that, Jesus, does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. I was just concerned with the uphill because I know that does happen. I had a vehicle that was messing with, and that's when I was doing the coils and spark ignition.
Yep.
So I'm in the middle of that, so I think it helped it, but hopefully it works. But yeah, that's why I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And believe me, if you get to something that kind of, and it's ignition breakdown, there's a definitely drop feel. I mean, if you're talking fuel, it's kind of a progression. It's not, fuel filters, or catalytic converters, you're talking about a definitely lack of power, not a breakdown, but a lack of power. So there is kind of a two type thing that I'm checking for when I'm going uphill. I'm looking to see how it actually accelerates. Does it do a kind of a slow kind of going accelerate up the hill? Yeah, and you got to take in consideration too the type of car you're working on too. Don't expect an LT. Well, let's put it this way: don't expect a Toyota Corolla to perform like a Camaro up a hill. There's definitely no comparison there. But if my Toyota Corolla is accelerating fairly good, and I don't have this kind of feel like somebody's pulling me back, then I'm pretty sure that the air the volumetric efficiency, which be my fuel, my air volume coming in and out, is pretty good, and my fuel capabilities, my fuel availability for that engine is pretty good too. Now we do have on some of the older cars, if the timing is not set correct, we can have some of that lag ability too. But you can find that with a vacuum gauge fairly well, and it will show kind of a low performance on the vacuum, and this is where some of that comes in too. So, but if you've got an actually dead drop off, like you feel like the car shakes as you go up, you definitely have some kind of ignition breakdown going on. All right, moving on. Good question. Good question. So fuel level. This really comes into play, and one of the things says below quarter, half, about three quarters, or full when it actually acts up. This could be possible. Again, that can be part of. I've had a few Suburban's gas tanks had a baffle, and the baffle inside the gas tank was for slosh, fuel slosh. And if you went around the corner and very abruptly, the fuel would kind of move over to one side of the tank, and then you would have the pickup tube inside the fuel tank that picks up the fuel going to the fuel rail would come out of the fuel, and then you have starvation. You would have no fuel, you would have air going in instead. This was a problem. So General Motors put in a baffle. It was a little plastic baffle. It was actually held down by some little pins, which were just these pins with little caps sets on them. And these would, after a period of time, with the fuel moving back and forth, the fuel would beat on this plastic baffle, and it would cause the actual set pins to lose their actual little clips that would, and then it would come loose, and then the baffle would move back and forth as you went around the corner, and it, actually beat up the actual fuel pump, and it became, a problem. The only true fix on that was put another fuel tank in, which they made some upgraded models that were better. The thing that we would do, we would try, and we'd tell the customer there's a couple things we could do. And again, always communicate with your customer when you're doing this kind of stuff. You would let them know, hey, it really needs a fuel tank, or we can actually reset the baffle, change the fuel pump out. By that time, the fuel pump was pretty bad, and then put in new set clips, and kind of hopefully it stayed together. But anyways, those were one of the things that come to mind when I had a possible fuel level problem. And you may find that customers tend to, especially when the economy changes and it's harder and harder to fill up the gas tank on your car, that they run the fuel low. And that when you get down below that quarter point, you actually overheat the fuel pump. One, because one of the things that the fuel does is help cool the fuel pump, because it's an electrical device. And the other thing too is you get a little bit of starvation going on when it gets fairly low. Additionally, you have, as much as they try to keep the fuel clean, these gas stations keep things clean. Whenever a fueling tank comes in, it does drop off a little debris. Either the tanker truck does not take the time on the hookup to make sure everything's clean before they start hooking things up, and a little bit of debris gets down. Well, it goes to the bottom of the actual gas station tank. When they drop the fuel, it kind of stirs things up. And a little tip for all of you is, if you see a gas tanker in the fuel station, don't fill up yet. Wait for that tanker to be gone for a couple hours, or else you may pick up some of that debris that might be down at the bottom of the tank. And that's including water. Even though we've gotten better monitoring on water, there is certain percentage that can still be down in that tank. But the level could make a big clue on what actually could be the problem also. And the octane, folks, this happens. When we had the big rush for fuel prices to go up, as you've noticed right now, fuel prices are way down. This has a lot to do with a lot of people aren't driving. We're on a stay-at-home order, and we're just now, some companies are going to be coming back, my understanding, by the end of this week, maybe in the beginning of next week. So, but get back to my point on the octane. The grade of fuel that you're putting in can actually cause problems with drivability. If you get, and I'm not trying to put them down, but if you get into the mom and pop shops, they're trying to pinch pennies. They can't really, they can't actually go and compete with the big companies. So they try to cut corners buy really inexpensive fuel with not a lot of the additives, because the additives can be quite expensive, and you get a lower grade of fuel, basically what it is, and you can smell it. I mean, I worked at USC, and one of my responsibility was the fuel station. And when I took it over, I actually got really educated by a few people on, and I mean, we had chemists over on campus too. And you could actually, we took out a sample and we smelled it. It was just like awful. It just almost smelled like garbage. So, but I changed that around, got into a better quality fuel for a pretty good price. It wasn't cheap, but a little bit better price. But also the octane, if a car is engineered for a 91 octane. It needs to have that 91 octane. We can have ill effects if it doesn't. Most of the manufacturers are putting out, several models of vehicles that run on 87 octane, which again, it's a little bit cheaper, and it does help not worrying about it being the right octane. That brings the other discussion about can I put a better octane? Yeah, you can. In a way, you're just kind of throwing your money away. So just things to think about. All right, so I always do this, folks, and it's an ongoing practice of mine. And anytime, and sometimes I'm doing it while I'm talking to the customer. I really like to get with the customer and walk around the car. A few things I'm doing. One of the things I'm doing is I'm looking at the car. I want to see what kind of physical shape it is outside, because if I have damages on the car, I want the customer to know about it so that I know about it, and then I'm documenting at the same time. But a lot of times what I like to do is pop open the hood, and it can be a sales pitch too. When you're I wasn't a service writer, I was more management, but if more dollars coming in, more, it looks better for me, and it actually does, serve my customer correct, correct. I shouldn't use the word correctly, because people have different ways of thinking of it, but it does do a good service for my customer. But I'm checking the oil, and oil, if you get a customer that has low oil all the time, red flags go on, especially when they start complaining about smells and stuff like that. They may have been prematurely wearing the motor out. And then at that time, if it's not a regular customer, I'm asking, when was the last time the oil was changed? When was the last time the coolant was changed? I'm also looking at the brake fluid, because I want to make sure I make it around the block. Because one of the things I will do, especially when it comes down to performance, I will go around the block in the car. If it's kind of a strange problem, I might even take the customer on the ride. But I'm looking at the brake fluid. I'm looking at the transmission fluid. Now, this is mainly on the automatics, except for the ones that are do not have a dipstick to them. Then you don't really have the ability to do that. But you keep that in mind when you go around the block, and you start feeling the transmission slip. There's the other questions you need to be asking is, when was the last time the transmission fluid was actually serviced? And then steering fluid, if it is not electrical steering, it's more of a hydraulic or steering type system that actually has steering fluid. To look at it, again, I want to make sure that that vehicle stays in a good condition, even after I've driven it. And again, this is something that doesn't get serviced very often. And just like differential fluid in your rear-wheel drive vehicles, there is a service interval on all fluids out there. Then check connections, all the components connected electrically, and if you have one that has multiple vacuums on it, or just any kind of vacuum connection, you want to make sure it's in place. And you'll find occasionally a vacuum hose fell off, and this was the whole problem. Or you might find an electric connector somehow got bumped, or the connector corroded away, and now you actually solve the problem really quickly. And it's not a bad thing to actually fix it at that time. I just would have a work order. The Bureau of Auto Repair can get really sticky on you opening the hood and doing stuff without authorization. I'm pointing that part out too. Check components for physical damage. Something that might look like it broke. Fan belts. One thing. You get a person that's complaining about not charging, and it's got multi V belts on it, and the belt broke. Well, you kind of got right there what it could possibly be. Battery, check the battery, the connections, corrosion, in the engine performance world. If we have low voltages, it can actually affect all kinds of things going on. So your battery connections are very crucial on actually getting current to the different components, and to the computer too, like that. So, and then it's just this quick, really quick, like, your coolant levels. You know, I pop off the cap. When I'm not talking about the pressure cap on the radiator right away, if it's hot, I'm not even thinking about opening that up. I don't want to get burnt. I don't want anybody else to get burnt. But if you look at the reservoir, the little surge tank of the reservoir, you kind of look inside, and it should be, if it's been driven to your shop, it should be up to the full level. If it's not, it's low. Then we can have a potential problem. I'm thinking that, in the back of my mind, is it possible that it has a head gasket issue going on? So then I'm looking at my oil, and remember that there is an expansion range in your oil dipstick, and it should be in mid, or if it's fully warmed up, it could be up to the top. We'll look out for overfilled vehicles, or filled oil levels. This can actually cause a potential problem too. And then, of course, your transmission fluid. And a few things I do, not so much with the transmission fluid. I'm actually smelling transmission fluid to see if it's burnt. I tend to look at it, and if it looks like it's got metal flaking going inside, I'm thinking there's possibly something in the transmission that's coming apart. On your engine oil, same thing, but engine oil seems to be a little bit cooler. So I'll take that with a pair of gloves on, and I'll kind of do between my fingers to see if there's actually a problem with mechanical breakdown. And you should always look for things that got a metallic look to them too. That kind of gives you a heads up there might be something internally going bad. All right. And then connections, like I said before, this is kind of over illustrated, but it did come from a actual vehicle. And this was a poor connection for a long period of time. And that poor connection actually caused some arcing going on. This is one of the main battery feeds onto a ground stud, and it just kind of arced itself away. Connections here, this is something that we found, and you'll notice that some were just taped off. They're missing some of the clips going on to it, and here we had connections that didn't know where they went to. This was actually part of a rebuild, home rebuild going on like that. So somebody would rebuilt the motor, and now they wanted everything connected up. Damage, of course, your connections, you want to look to see if maybe something happened. This is actually a map sensor, one of the early map sensors, and a little part that, nipple that you actually push the vacuum hose onto, it had actually been broken off. And this was the main reason behind it. And then this is not over illustrated. You're going to find cars that sometimes come into your shop, and this is what they look like. Now, I'm going to give you the heads up on this. When it's this bad, that battery is pretty much toast. You're going to find it's probably sulfating pretty well. And also, my concerns is the battery cables. If it's up here, this fuzzy and green and stuff like that, believe it or not, it's actually going all the way down the cable. So those cables really need to be replaced like that. So I'm just giving you the straight stuff on this. I've seen it. If you take one of these cables and you take a knife and cut it to cut the insulation back, you're going to see it actually crawling up inside the cable itself. All right, and always, as I've always said in all classes, this class and pretty much all my classes, you want to pay attention to technical service bulletins. This really comes prominent when you start talking about diagnostic trouble codes. I have this thing in the back of my mind because I did this stupid thing back in my day. I was working for USC. I had a full-size van, Ford van. It was part of our van pool, kind of program that we had, and I got a complaint of a check engine light on. Well, I pulled codes on it, and I found that it had a small evap leak. Now, an evap is part of the emissions package on all cars. It's to control the evaporative emissions from going out into the atmosphere, and they pretty much self-contain themselves. Well, I pulled a small evap leak, and some of the practices are to, one, actually put the tank under slight pressure with smoke. It's a smoke that has a dye to it. You use a special set of glasses and a light, and you start looking for any kind of possible leaks, and this will leave a nice green, sometimes bluish tint on hoses and places that might have an actual leak coming out. I mean, this would be the smoke coming out. And I smoked it and could not find any. I checked the fuel cap. That's one of the ones that can happen, especially with small leaks. I dropped the tank and did some more smoke in it. Could not find any kind of issue like that too. Um, I thought you were against dyes. On AC, yes, I'm against dyes on AC, but you can. It just depends on the shop you're at. Dyes, when it comes to fluid, and this is common practice in the smog world. When I'm talking about the dyes and smoke going on, this it actually coats things. The reason I have an issue with dyes in air conditioning is the problem with that is it displaces volume, and where I'm not really so much worried about in the oil. If I have a leak I can't find, I use a dye as far as oils go. And if there's a leak, evaporative leak, sometimes that's the only way you can actually find an actual leak. But anyways, I went ahead and I smoked and I smoked and I smoked. I could find nothing. So out of frustration, I actually called a friend of mine. This again goes back to networking, folks. You want to make sure you network. I called a friend of mine at Montebello Ford, which wasn't too far from USC, and I said, hey, I'm having this problem. And he kind of chuckled a little bit and he said, Marty, I'm one of your students and you're not even following your own advice. And I said, what do you mean? Did you check TSVs on that? And I said, oh, shoot, no, I didn't. And he actually, he said, bring it in. I'll take care of it for you. And basically it was a reprogramming of the actual computer. There was a glitch. Now, early on, we had a 40 thousandths of a 40 thousandths of an inch of possible leak, and it would not trigger a fault. And then it went down to 20 thousandths of an inch, and then actually and then it wouldn't trigger a fault. But somehow it didn't get programmed with a 0.02. It actually got programmed with a 0.0002. So you can see it was a much smaller, and because of the size of it, it would never really clear that that actual light out, and it would not clear that actual code. So anyways, learned, and that keeps in the back of mind. And this is where I really want to press on you about technical service bulletins. There are service bulletins out there that might be for the code, and sometimes they can give upgraded procedures and programming and also possible upgraded parts. So keep that in mind when we go into it. And you can find them through different sources as we go along. And it would behoove you that to actually look at possible updates. Just like your computer that you are on, and I even talk about your phones. You're always getting those update notifications saying, hey, you need to update your phone to the newest critical patch. Same thing can happen with cars. There may be by region updates. Some regions are warmer, some regions are colder. We have different drivability out here in California than they might have back in Minnesota. So there's things that actually can be regional programming, or it could be just a total, they found something that they didn't think about. And, believe it or not, we are all, as new car buyers, guinea pigs to find out what kind of glitches might be in that car as we go along too. They take in the information and they do programming patches. So just things to consider when you're actually building up your diagnostic routines. And and don't feel, and believe me, my ego went away a long time ago. but don't have the big enough ego that you can't go out and ask questions of people in your network. And if you don't really have a big network, start building it. There's a different, different ways of doing that. Your fellow students, I can be part of your network. There can be other people that can be part of your network too. Industry, as you get into the job market, you're building up your networks and like that. But there's different online services too, beyond the ALLDATA and the Shopkey and the OEMs. There's actually one that's called Identifix. They're a really good company. But they do charge a subscription fee, but they can find, and I really feel that they really work hard to earn your money. They'll find some weird stuff for you too. And what's good about Identifix too is other techs post what they find, and it could be here in California, it could be back east, all over the place. And then you kind of get an idea, and they do a little. It looks like a little target on their actual program, showing where the technician found the problem, like that. And if I could not find a wiring diagram for anything. I mean, I went to libraries, I went online, I could not find it. But anyways, and ended up, I asked them for a wiring diagram. I think it was for a 1980 Jaguar, and I needed it for an electrical problem. And they didn't have it on stock. They didn't have it on their lookup. But doggone it, if I didn't ask for it, and they actually faxed it over to me, so which helped me fix up that problem here. So there's some things that they can do for you too. And I forgot to put a shout out about the IATN network. This is a network of technicians. You can do the free site or the pay site, and it definitely is a networking thing where you can actually talk to other technicians to find out what they may have found. IATN actually put in some different training possibilities too. Check it out, see if you like it. I'm not kind of twisting you to go to IATN, but there is some good stuff in there. I've used it a few times. I've responded to a few texts out there also as we went on. And then, if it's a customer of yours, or you're not even a customer of yours, look for, ask them about possible repairs that have been done lately. And if it's in your history, you can find out what repairs have been done lately or lack of repairs done lately. And then you can actually, and it helps too when the customer says, no, I don't have the money to fix it right now. And you can actually use this as, we did recommend some time ago that you needed to have this done. This might be kind of a following complication because it wasn't done. So this is, some stuff you can do like that. And then also look for aftermarket accessories. Some of the aftermarket accessories are approved by the Air Resources Board, and some of them are not. And if they're aftermarket pieces on there, they may be part of that actual symptom that the customer is talking about. So keep that in mind too. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did work on a Jag. I mean, it was one of those mom and pop shops that we worked on everything, which was a good experience. Tyler's over there bugging me. I'm just kidding. He's asking questions like that. All right, so then we go into the test drive, folks. So one of the things I do before it's a test drive, I check the pedal height of the brakes. I do not want to hit that actual wall. I've had a few occasions where, and this really gets scary when the pedal fades. If I get a customer complaint that the pedal fades, it's not going for a test drive. I am definitely checking all points of that brake system before I even go anywhere. But if there's no complaint about it, I kind of do the pedal check, start the car up, make sure it works before I go around the block, and listen to the engine soundness. If it's got some unusual sounds to it, and it sounds like the engine's coming apart, it's really not getting a test drive. And then I'm checking the gauges. And one of the things I recommended you do right off the get-go, we had a deep policy in a lot of the shops I had worked for, is checking the fuel gauge. If it's, that light's on and it's down to the E mark, you need to actually let the customer know that you're going to have to put some gas in it before you go any farther. We had a policy, and this is before gasoline was $4 a gallon. At one shop I worked at, and it was, I think at the time it was $1.50 a gallon. We charged them $5 a gallon for us to actually put fuel in it. So customers start bringing in the car with at least a half tank or quarter tank, like that. Do all the gauges work too? You want to see if they're all operating. If I have a oil light on and the gauge is all the way down and I hear a lot of clattering going on, that car isn't moving, like that. I've already checked the oil by that time too. During the test drive, always try to duplicate the customer's drive cycle or driving style. Some people drive different than other people drive. So listen to the engine soundness, like I said before, look for unusual, check gauges, let the engine idle, check quality of engine idle. Complete several accelerations, light, medium, and hard. Trying to get maybe that breakdown. Maybe we go a little bit farther and we're actually checking how smoothly it accelerates too, like that. If available, use different road trains, and this may not be in your arsenal of tools. I've had several shops I've worked for, and we did not have a lot of drive areas, but I would find like a grocery store towards the back of it, maybe a back of a mall. Just be very cautious. People are walking in and out. You really got to use a lot of common sense to do that. But if you have a hill nearby that you can actually go up, or if you have a terrain that's different, that might help you too. Document all your findings during your test drive. This is while you're stopping. Don't do it while you're driving, but unless you're recording it verbally, then you might do it that way. But make sure that you write it all down, because you will, and if you get a shop that's very, it has a lot of customers, you've got a lot of throughput going on, you want to make sure you write down each one. I many times, I'll be in the middle of a diagnosis and my boss would say, hey, Marty, I need you to come over and look at, talk to this customer. Or, hey, Marty, I need you to look at this car. I'll go ahead and stop what you're doing right there. I need you to come over and look at this right away. So this, you get multiple cars going on. They kind of can blend after a period of time. So make sure you write down all your findings as you're going along. Okay, so always start with the basics. I can't stress enough, voltages, you need to make sure you're checking them and make sure that you are, checking from point to point. And what I mean by that, not just at the battery, you want to check that, voltage going into the computer. Or you want to make sure it has enough voltage going into that sensor. This is all critical, especially when it comes into computer controlled cars. And this is just showing you if I'm cranking, watch it, it's cranking the battery right now, and we should have above 9.6, volts for, if it's 70 degrees outside. Doing voltage drop tests against different circuits. This is only after I've been through other steps, and I want to make sure I have good voltage drop. Voltage drop test is so much better than just the voltage availability. Okay. And then checking body grounds that I'm doing right here, make sure I got a good ground going on, and then checking your charging voltage, make sure your battery is being charged up. And one other test I like to do on this too is checking for diode leakage. And there's simple ways of doing that, and you can use a lot of your handheld charging system testers will actually do that for you too. They're looking for a possible diode inside the alternator that actually is open, and now it's actually allowing it to bleed both ways, and you're actually getting AC voltage. AC voltage will scramble a computer, something terrible like that. And charging voltage drop test here also. And then we're checking for the charging volt drop on the negative side. Make sure you got good connections going on. And of course, your scan tool, and going into some scan tool basics. There's different types of scan tools. I put this old one that I have and I still have it to this day. And it was a cartridge-driven one, the O2C 2000, and they went to a 4000. But you get into the newer stuff, it's a lot more capabilities. Even some of the generic ones or the global ones they put out there too. Early on, we had different types of connections for our, OBD1 and OBD2. OBD2, pretty much put everything on the standardized type of connectors, which we're very thankful for that, because you had to have all kinds of these connectors. And believe it or not, some of my diagnostics went with a paper clip. Or I had the key that we would use to jumper connectors on the old connection, A and B, on the GMs. On the Chryslers, we would cycle the key 3 times to make that work. And on some of the Nissans, we actually had to turn a little dial. So these were the early on stuff like that. So anyways, I am going to stop here. We're at 20.